Before Ponzi scheme became a warning, it was a promise of 50% returns in 45 days, a promise that ordinary people, workers, immigrants, clerks, widows, could become rich. Quickly, without factories, without land, without connections, just trust. He did not have oil wells. He did not command railroads or banks. He did not carry ancient family money. He had a story, and for a few extraordinary months in 1920, Boston believed him. Thousands of people stood in line to hand their savings to one man, not because they were foolish, because he made the impossible feel inevitable. This is the story of Charles Ponzi, the man who sold impossible returns, built an empire out of belief, and left behind a scam so perfect they named it after him. Carlo Ponzi was born in Parma, Italy, in 1882. He was not born into poverty. His family had known better days, and that gap between what had been and what now was would define him for the rest of his life. He arrived in America in 1903. By some accounts, he stepped off the boat with $2.50. Whether that detail is exact or embellished, the spirit of it was true. He had almost nothing except charm and hunger. He drifted through the American machine, waiter, clerk, salesman, forger. In Canada, he served time in prison for check fraud. In Atlanta, he was imprisoned again for smuggling Italian immigrants across the border. He did not emerge from these years broken. He emerged from them educated. Not in finance, not in law, in people. He had spent years watching what men wanted. He had learned that desire is not rational, that the promise of more is more powerful than the reality of enough. By 1917, he was back in Boston, married, struggling, working odd jobs, writing letters, chasing ideas. He was 35 years old. He had failed repeatedly. He had a criminal record, and he still believed, with a ferocity that bordered on delusion, that he was meant for something larger. That belief would soon become one of the most dangerous financial forces in America. In 1919, a routine piece of mail changed everything. Ponzi received a letter from a business contact in Spain. Inside was an international reply coupon, a small postal instrument that allowed the sender to prepay the cost of a reply from another country. Ponzi noticed something. These coupons could be purchased cheaply in countries where currencies had been weakened by the First World War: Italy, Spain, Poland, and theoretically, they could be redeemed in the United States for stamps of a higher face value. On paper, it looked like arbitrage. Buy low in one country, redeem high in another. Ponzi began calculating. The numbers on a small scale seemed to work, but there was one problem he chose not to examine too closely. The scheme was not scalable. There were not enough international reply coupons in circulation to generate the kind of returns he intended to promise. Moving them across borders in volume was slow, expensive, and legally complicated. The postal coupon was never the real product. Ponzi understood this, and he chose the story over the substance. In December of 1919, he founded the Securities Exchange Company. He began offering investors a return of 50% in 45 days, 100% in 90. The mechanism he offered investors was the postal coupon. The mechanism that actually paid them was newer investors' money. He did not yet know this structure had a name. He did not need to. He only needed the first believers. In the early months of 1920, the machine began to move. The first investors were paid, exactly as promised, on time, in full. And this is where the real scam began. Because when the first believers were paid, they became the advertisement. They told their neighbors, their families, their colleagues. Profit became proof. The line outside Ponzi's office on School Street grew longer every week. Immigrants who had spent years scraping together savings, working-class families who had never owned investments, small business owners, tradesmen, civil servants. They came because the numbers seemed real, because someone they knew had already won. The line outside his office was not merely a line of investors, it was a line of witnesses, each one confirming the illusion for the next. Ponzi became a phenomenon. Newspapers ran his photograph. He was interviewed like a celebrity. He moved into a mansion in Lexington. He bought a blue limousine. He wore fur-trimmed coats and carried a gold-tipped cane. He was the immigrant who had beaten the system, the proof that America worked, the man who had found the machine inside the machine. At the peak of the operation, he was taking in hundreds of thousands of dollars per day. People mortgaged their homes. Some investors handed him their entire life savings. And Ponzi, surrounded by money he had not earned, projecting a confidence that never wavered, kept promising. 50%. 45 days. The crowd that built him did not see it yet. But the structure underneath was already cracking. It started with questions. In July of 1920, the Boston Post began investigating. A financial analyst named Clarence Barron, founder of Barron's Financial News, pointed out the arithmetic problem at the heart of the scheme. To justify Ponzi's claims, there would have needed to be millions upon millions of international reply coupons in circulation. The actual number was around 27,000. The gap was not a discrepancy. It was proof. Ponzi sued the Post for defamation. He held press conferences. He smiled for the cameras. He denied everything with a calm that some mistook for innocence. But the doubt had been planted. And doubt in a system built entirely on belief is catastrophic. Investors who had been walking in to deposit money began walking in to withdraw it. The structure could not survive withdrawals at scale. New money was no longer arriving fast enough to pay the old. Bank regulators moved in. Auditors discovered the books were a fiction. On August 12, 1920, less than 9 months after the first investment, Charles Ponzi was arrested. The final accounting was devastating. He had taken in approximately $15 million from around 30,000 investors. Most of them received nothing back. Families lost savings they had spent years building. Several of the banks that had done business with Ponzi collapsed alongside him. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. After his release, he attempted further frauds in Florida. He was imprisoned again. He was eventually deported to Italy in 1934. He died in Rio de Janeiro in 1949. He had almost no money. The man who had promised wealth to thousands died with almost none of his own. Charles Ponzi didn't invent fraud. Schemes built on paying old investors with new money had existed long before him. But he gave the modern world something older frauds lacked. He gave it a template, clear enough to name, recognizable enough to warn against, and yet persistent enough to survive every warning. The structure returned. It returned in the 1990s when Bernie Madoff built what became known as the largest Ponzi scheme in history, with account statements showing around $65 billion inside the most regulated financial market on Earth. It returned in crypto markets, in offshore investment funds, in guaranteed return schemes dressed in the language of innovation. The names change, the pitch changes, the technology changes, the psychology does not. Because Ponzi did not succeed merely by lying. He succeeded because he offered people something they already wanted to believe. The feeling of being early. The sense that they had found something others had missed. The idea that wealth, real, permanent, life-changing wealth, was finally within reach. People do not fall for scams only because they are unintelligent. They fall because the scam speaks directly to something true inside them. The desire for security, the exhaustion of slow progress, the fear of being left behind while others advance. Ponzi understood all of it. He understood it the way a man who has been excluded understands the machine. Not from inside it, but from a position where he could see every gear, every lever, every door that was kept closed. And instead of building something real, he built the appearance of it. The illusion was so convincing that it took less than a year to consume an entire city's faith. That is the warning. Not that con men exist. They always have. The warning is that the conditions for belief, anxiety, ambition, social proof, the fear of missing out, are always present. They are present right now. The oldest scam in the world is not the false investment. It is the promise that greed can be made safe. Ponzi understood that promise. And for a moment, so did everyone who handed him their money. This is Strivor. Power, money, and the hidden forces that shape history. Subscribe for the next story, before the next promise finds you.